This is a production of WGBH2 Boston.
Tonight on Greater Boston, Super Tuesday, Take 3. In a few hours, the two nominations could be locked up or not. Our caucus, the Globe's Joan Vanocchi and BC's David Hopkins, explores. Plus, Charlie Baker is the most popular governor in America. But ahead, we'll speak with a man who just may challenge him in 2018. Then, 5 years since the start of Syria's civil war, the Ground Truth Project's Charlie Sennett joins me to talk the state of the country now and how its millions of displaced people are coping. And finally, my thoughts on elusive justice for the family of DJ Henry, the local football player killed by a police officer in New York in 2010. This may be the most anticipated Tuesday night in election 2016 so far, or at least since last Tuesday night and the one before. With contests in Florida, Illinois, Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio, we'll soon learn whether Marco Rubio and John Kasich can take their home states and continue, or whether Ted Cruz is right and this is a two-man race, and if anyone can actually stop Donald Trump. On the Democratic side, it's Bernie Sanders' chance to shake things up yet again, or will Hillary Clinton tie things up before bedtime? Joining me to discuss actually none of that are Joan Vanocchi and a Boston Globe columnist. Joan, it's good to see you. David Hopkins is a political scientist at BC and co-author of Presidential Elections, Strategies and Structures of American Politics. It's good to meet you. Can I start with you? Let's assume Trump runs the table tonight. Kasich loses Ohio and Rubio loses Florida. Or even if not tonight, Trump clinches in the near future. The debate we're going to obsess on, is the Republican Party going to coalesce around him or is there going to be internal warfare? Does your history give you any insight as to what's going to happen, or is this such an outlying election that we can't predict anything?
It's a pretty outlying election. There's no clear historical parallel in the modern era to an election quite like this. And the prospect of maybe a contested convention, of an attempt by the party leadership to sort of push back against Trump's candidacy. So it's hard to point to an easy historical parallel.
Do they coalesce? Or, I mean, I can't tell if this is a story that we're magnifying in the media or if it's real. They don't want Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders to be president of the United States, so they'll swallow hard and take Trump, won't they?
I think I agree with you, Jim, because in the end, if they think that he's a winner, they're going to stand behind him, and they'll just rationalize that winning is better than losing, and they'll stick with him.
Do you think the confrontations, Friday night being the centerpiece, but obviously there were more before and some after, did they hurt him? I mean, a lot of experts are speculating that with the constituency he's trying to mine, it actually helped him. Is that possible?
Everything I've predicted and opined about has turned out to be wrong.
Well, I'm in the same boat you are, so do it anyway. Go ahead.
They seem like it helps him.
Do you think it does?
It may help him get a few votes, but at the same time it risks the party leaders being more and more worried about the prospect of him getting a nomination and this continuing all the way through a general election.
But, the party leaders are acting like they're surprised. I mean, this is the guy who was the lead birther in America. What did they think they were getting? I mean,
not someone who's actually going to win the nomination.
Well, that's probably right. Okay. You wrote about this Romney thing, which I can't figure out at all. You said something like, it was too bad that he was with Donald Trump before he was against him. Do you have a decent explanation of why Romney is doing what he's doing, including, by the way, being in Ohio the day before the election with Kasich yesterday, but not even endorsing his candidacy?
Well, I read a very long interview with him in the Boston Globe,
yes,
in which he said that he felt that he had to do the right thing and this was the right thing to do. But it just didn't make, at the very least, in that speech, he should have acknowledged the endorsement and the fact that he sought the endorsement from Trump in 2012 and, appeared with him and accepted it and was thrilled with it. And at least that would have given him some credibility. But it just looked like another Romney flip-flop.
Well, beyond the Romney flip-flop, doesn't it feel, considering who the key Trump constituency is, it's almost like Trump would pay Romney to say, come out and trash me if you would. Right. That's just going to cause my angry anti-establishment people to love me even more, no?
He looked as establishment as it gets, standing up there, giving that speech, everything Trump is not, kind of wooden and scripted, and there's Donald Trump, waving and trumping along
and selling stakes that aren't
himself,
even his.
right.
There's no historical precedent for this, right? I mean, the Romney thing, the prior nominee of the party trashing and who accepted the Trump endorsement, trashing the current likely nominee, right?
Well, I defer to you, the historian, but his father did do something similar, right?
What his father did was similar.
Well, his father ran in 1968 and was trying to, sort of under the old system run for president. But this is, we have had a new system since then where the primaries and caucuses actually select the delegates. And the problem that the anti-Trump forces have sort of faced is that not only do they not like Trump, but really most of them don't like Ted Cruz either, and he's the second place guy. So they're sort of left with no real horse of their own. They're left saying, stop Trump, but we don't really like Cruz either. Let's hope to kick it to a convention and figure it out then. And I'm not sure that that's going to work. That's a high-risk play they're making.
Let's go to the Democratic side for a minute. Even if Bernie Sanders continues the Michigan thing and ekes out a victory, let's say in Ohio or Missouri, Hillary Clinton is still crushing him with delegates because of the superdelegates. What does he achieve tonight, even if it's a great night for him, Joan Venaki?
Well, first of all, he stays in the race. That seems clear. I mean, he's staying all the way to the convention.
Well, he's staying anyway. He's got a ton of dough.
Right.
I mean, he's not going
And
anywhere.
he's making it harder for her. He really is. I mean, even though people keep on talking about the math of it and the numbers and that there's no way that she can not be the nominee, he's making her look sort of tired. Is making, I think he just makes it harder for her all the way around.
One of the ways he's made it harder is in this whole trade thing. I want to play you a clip from Thursday night from Trump and last night from Bernie Sanders. Both of these guys talking about an issue that they've been campaigning on that may be trouble in the primaries and then in the final potentially for Hillary Clinton. Here it is.
Our country and our trade and our deals and most importantly, our jobs are going to hell.
It is part of disastrous trade policies.
We will start building those factories and those plants. Instead of in China, we'll build them here. And people will buy product from here rather than buying it through China, where we're being ripped off. And we have a $505 billion trade deficit right now.
It is not only the loss of millions of jobs because of NAFTA and PNTR with China, where companies are searching for cheap labor around the world. You do not have to drive wages down or throw American workers out on the street.
You could put Trump's words in Sanders' mouth and Sanders' words in Trump's mouth, and they wouldn't miss a beat.
Except that Trump is wearing a shirt and tie made in Mexico or China or somewhere that he's railing against.
Yeah, but Rubio has mentioned that 4,000 times. How has that hurt Donald Trump?
Well, it should, and that's kind of the frustrating part of it, I guess.
Yeah, how about this trade? It seems to me to be a potential albatross. Now, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it was the gold standard once when she worked for Barack Obama, and now she opposes it. As a candidate against Obama, she was against the trade deal with South Korea. She becomes Secretary of State. All of a sudden, she embraces the trade deal. This seems to be, just as it was the economy stupid for Bill Clinton, it seems to be its trade policy stupid for Trump and Sanders, no?
It's part of the story, I think, for both of them, but I think it's part of a larger attack on, the sort of the status quo in politics, and it's expressing a larger anger that a lot of voters on both the left and the right have felt with the kind of gridlocked politics we've been having and the sort of the lack of economic growth and economic equality in the country. So it's a specific issue that I think has a lot of larger ramifications and larger symbolic meaning.
When you wrote your piece recently is Clinton, the headline, I know you don't write the headlines, Clinton ready for the onslaught from Trump. Is this part of the onslaught, or you just mean the vitriol, the personal attacks? What did you mean there? What was the answer? Is she ready?
Well,
assuming they are the nominees?
Trump keeps on saying he's only started, or he hasn't even started in. So I think what lies ahead will get even more personal. And in the style, I don't think he'll hold back against Hillary any more than he held back against Rubio or Cruz or any of his other rivals. I think he will bring the same thing to the table with her. But to get just back to trade for a minute,
Sure.
I mean, what if it turns out, it's Hillary versus Trump? Who's the bigger hypocrite on trade? I don't know why he gets a pass and she doesn't.
Where in this campaign so far has his hypocrisy hurt him with one voter, as far as you can tell?
It hasn't.
There are different rules, are there not?
I guess there are different rules, but we'll see in a general if that still holds.
Before we go very quickly here, I want to pop up some numbers. We gave recent numbers. These are the latest. Of the 22 candidates, I think, who started this thing, David, the two with the highest unfavorables are the two people who are leading their races. 62% unfavorable Trump, 54% Clinton. Can you give me a quick explanation of how it ended up this way?
Well, on the Republican side, Trump has the most first place, first choice voters, and he also has the most people who dislike him. So he's such a polarizing figure, but in a multi-candidate race, that actually has worked to his advantage.
Okay, but how about Clinton?
With Clinton, I think one of the reasons that Sanders is doing better than expected is that there is a certain lack of enthusiasm for Clinton among Democrats. But these numbers, these broader numbers, also reflect the fact that a lot of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents don't like her either.
We got to go. Joan, it's a pleasure. Nice to see you. David, it's nice to meet you. Thank you so much,
Thanks
both
a lot,
of you,
Jim.
for your time. Later, we'll get an update on Syria. 5 years and millions of refugees since the start of the civil war there, and the latest for the family of DJ Henry in relentless pursuit of justice for a son gunned down by a cop in a small New York town. But first, as you heard from the Globe's Stephen Smith last night, there is one man in Massachusetts looking to shake up the political landscape. One man who may decide to challenge the most popular governor in America. That man would be Dan Wolf, founder of Cape Air and retiring state senator from Harwich. Senator, it's good to see you.
Great to see you, Jim.
So
Thanks.
in one short Globe interview, you criticized Baker, your fellow Democrats, the Affordable Care Act, and Deval Patrick. So can we start with Baker? Is that okay with you?
I have a feeling it's going to be lonely in the State House tomorrow.
It may be. So you know that great line from Groucho, there's nothing like good timing, and this is nothing like good timing? So Baker's at 74%. He signs the opioid bill. Every Democrat is falling over themselves, praising him for his wonderful work. They seem to love him. What are they missing from the Dan Wolf perspective about Charlie Baker?
Well, let's separate the politics of the day from the issues of the day. Mm-hmm. And, generationally, Jim, you and I have had discussions about what's happened to poor and working people in the Commonwealth and nationally. And the problem is, if you look at those issues and you look at the data, we keep moving backwards. Since 2010, the lowest 20% has lost 8% in wage and 21% in net
In this
work.
state?
Yeah, in this state. Mm-hmm. It's a national figure, but Massachusetts, unfortunately, really conforms with those national trends.
So is it primarily the income inequality thing that you think hasn't been addressed?
I think income inequality isn't being addressed, but I think that reflects itself in a lack of investment in education as it relates to early childhood education, as it relates to higher education, and then as it relates to infrastructure. The MBTA is a perfect example. We are choosing to not invest in long-term infrastructure there. We are choosing to put more fares on the back of the people who depend on it to get to work, those working and poor people that we talked about, and we don't have a long-term vision for the MBTA.
But Senator Wolf, you think we need new taxes to do what the people need. Charlie Baker ran as a no-tax candidate, and the people said he's the guy we want. So isn't he honoring his pledge to the people?
So Jim, the whole no tax or more tax issue needs to be I think we need to actually make it a slightly more complicated issue. When you look at the way the economy is now structured, with all of the wealth and income going into one place, the graduated income tax ballot initiative, which will be on the ballot in
millionaires tax,
so-called millionaires tax, is a step in the right direction. So it isn't a question of more or less tax. It's a question of how we raise revenue to get the job done. Over the last 20 years, we've cut over $3 billion in revenue. And we still want Massachusetts to lead in infrastructure and education and all the other areas. It doesn't work.
As you well know, Charlie Baker could not do one single thing that requires legislative approval unless your fellow Democrats signed off on it. They can veto anything that he vetoes, they could override. Anything he proposes, they could kill. So if Baker is not doing what you think the Commonwealth needs, then your fellow Democrats are letting down the same people, no?
Well, look, I've been asked a lot of times to critique Charlie Baker. My answer to that is, after 8 years with Deval Patrick and an 80% majority in the legislature, if we couldn't get things done during that period to address a lot of the issues that you and I are talking about, it's unfair to beat up on a governor who's been in for 14 months. And I do feel that way. Now, that having been said, there's still a lack of vision in an austerity plan coming from Charlie Baker, which isn't going to work. If you look at those places in Europe that tried to cut their way to prosperity, that isn't going to work, and it's not going to work for the poor and working families in Massachusetts.
Well, but again, none of the Baker austerity plan, as you call it, could be in place were it not for Democrats signing off on that plan. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement.
You wrote a piece, you're a business guy for Bernie Sanders. This sounds like Bernie Sanders comes to Massachusetts. You're also a single-payer person. You prefer it to the Affordable Care. Is it unfair to characterize you the way you talk about a systemic failure of our democracy? So does he. Are you Bernie Sanders in here?
Well, no, I wouldn't say I'm Bernie Sanders here, but there's certainly some overlap. Our political system has disenfranchised the electorate, the voters, the people that depend on a healthy democracy to deliver on all those things that you and I have talked about. And there is a fracture in that. And it's bipartisan, unfortunately. We want bipartisan. Well, we got a bipartisan fracture here. So I think we really need to make a concerted effort to reconnect the voters of the Commonwealth with what's going on in the State House.
I know you're very careful to say to Josh Miller in the Globe, you haven't made a decision about what you're doing. It's far too early. But if things are so bad and you're so committed to public service, why don't you just say it? Say the Democrats in the state need a leader. They're not getting the leadership they need. It seems to be what you're saying from Charlie Baker and your Democratic colleagues. So I'm going to try to lead them out of the wilderness. Why don't you just do it?
My commitment now is to be part of a movement that I think is a national groundswell. And it is impossible to say in 2 years or in a year and a half where that'll be. I will be happy supporting someone else who is a leader. I will be happy carrying signs in the back of the march. So I don't need to be the leader, but I'm certainly open to that if that's the calling.
When are you making that decision?
It'll be at least a year from now. So right now we're focused on the issues and really trying to work with the Democratic Party to, I think, be more effective, and then really understand what it is to deal with a conservative Republican governor and try to be constructive, not simply just making friends.
Charlie Baker being the conservative Republican governor.
Charlie Baker is a conservative Republican governor.
Dan Wolf, it's nice to see you.
Thanks, Jim.
We'll be talking a lot in the future. Senator Dan Wolf. It's been 5 years since civil war first broke out in Syria, and that time hundreds of thousands have been killed. About half the country's population has been displaced, both in and outside of Syria. Charlie Sennett, founder of the Ground Truth Project here at GBH, has traveled to the region several times over the past 5 years and joined me to talk about where things stand now and the path forward. So, Charlie, about a month ago when I talked to you on the radio, when John Kerry said we're on the verge of an imminent ceasefire, or whatever you want to call it over there in Syria, you were skeptical. Is that a fair statement?
Very skeptical.
Okay, 2 weeks in, give or take a couple of days, where are you now?
Well, I have to reverse my position. This is a more enduring truce, if we can call it that, than anyone had anticipated. We're at 2 weeks and counting, and it's really holding. I think it's a really positive sign, one that is surprising a lot of people in the region.
What's positive? That there's a truce, or that negotiations are going somewhere, or both? What's the deal?
Well, I mean, what's positive is people aren't dying, right? So we have 300,000 people killed in this war on the 5th anniversary and counting. And at least for the last 2 weeks, we've been able to limit the counting of the dead. It hasn't been a full ceasefire because you still have elements that are fighting in there, but largely holding, and that in and of itself is very important. It leverages some very important things that are ongoing right now. The talks in Geneva, which hopefully will yield real negotiations, with this sort of tenuous cessation of hostilities. It's hoped that the talks will do better, go further than anyone anticipated there. And you also have a situation with the Russians now announcing that they're going to pull back, which is also critical and tied to this truce.
In the talks, ISIS and Al-Qaeda not involved, obviously, correct?
Right, that's right.
The thing I don't quite understand about the talks, though, is I don't understand what the goal is. Usually, when you see some international thing, you say, well, the ultimate goal, even if it's not fully achievable, is X.
Yeah.
But for one side, the ultimate goal is Assad has got to go.
Right.
The regime has got to be ended. For the other side, it's, well, wait a second. It's far better to have a stable killer, for lack of a better expression, than have an unstable government of killers who we don't understand. So how do you ever get anywhere when you don't even agree on what the ultimate goal is, much less the means?
It's a good point. But, I mean, the ends of brutal wars like this one in Syria often don't have an ending with a dream of democracy. It's really about ending a nightmare that's ongoing. And that often is what motivates the parties to come to the table and stop the fighting.
I want to go back to 2012 and tell me if this infamous comment by the president has complicated the whole thing. This is the infamous red line comment.
Okay.
Here it is.
We have been very clear to the Assad regime, but also to other players on the ground, that a red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. That would change my calculus. That would change my equation.
Looks like Barack Obama's son, I'll tell you from them. So obviously the red line never quite materialized. He said, ultimately it just never happened. Does that complicate where we are now? I don't even understand what the United States position in these negotiations is.
I think it's a fair question. I do think the Obama administration has been very vague on what it wants to accomplish in Syria, why it's been so hesitant to go in and try to really engage with this conflict. We've taken a sideline while Russia has gone in. This is a big proxy war. The Saudis are supporting the Sunni elements. The Iranians are supporting the Shia elements. It's a mess. That red line was crossed, and I do think this has been a policy of fits and starts for the Obama administration. I think Secretary of State Kerry has brought some coherence to the policy. I mean, we have shifted to diplomacy. Diplomacy right now, in this moment, appears to be working. We often forget that the war in Syria begins with the Arab Spring. Those were demonstrations in the street that were pro-democracy demonstrations and nonviolent. They were crushed by the regime. That created violence, which spurred an armed opposition, which then splintered into Islamic militants. We have to remember that the way the Middle East works, all parts are interconnected. That's why it's a proxy war. And if you really dial it back and you think about a 100-year history, and I do think this war and this Arab Spring are a 100-year event, we're talking about the lines formed in World War I slowly vanishing, and the region really being recast.
One of the things you guys do great at Ground Truth is you inject the human element. I mean, as horrific as 300,000 killed and millions displaced and 4 million refugees is, whatever the actual number is, it's not a human equation.
Right.
Tell us what we're about to see.
Sure. So we spent time in the refugee camps in Syria, on the border of Syria, in Jordan, and in Lebanon. And what we came across were the stories of women and children in particular that really reveal the human side of what it is to be a refugee.
And we're about to see a family with a 13-year-old daughter who is married off. Let's watch this.
هلا بتول عمرها 13 سنة ونص. شباب كتير يعني مشاكلهم كتير، كل ما يشوف حدا يصير يطلع زيادة مثل التحرش، يعني حتى نكون ماشيين نحن حدا نتضايق كتير. أول فرصة صحت لنا انه نجوز بتول ونرتاح من هيك قصص.
اصلا يعني حاسين حالنا ميتين، معيشين حالنا غصب عنا كرمال اولادنا. ما بتحبي تعيشي، يعني ما في شيء مشجع للحياة.
في اللي مشجع اولادنا بنطلع فيهم هيك بنلاقي هالدنيا.
I feel like we are dead. So part of the reason why they agreed to this marriage was because of the harassment of money. I assume survival was a piece of it too, no?
It is a piece of it. I think protecting their daughter and protecting their family. And how often do you get to hear the story of a child bride from the parents' point of view and the enormous regret they have? I mean, the World Health Organization indicates that the leading cause of death for young women in places like these refugee camps is childbirth. And, this is an extraordinary burden on her. She feels like she's lost her childhood. Imagine how you'd feel. And what we can't forget is this isn't just a sort of indifferent couple marrying off their daughter. This is a tortured couple with no other option.
So briefly, if we can, let's talk refugees. When you see families like that, we have committed to take a pitifully small number of people by September this year, 10,000 in the U.S. We're not going to come close to even 10,000, are we?
Among the 10,000, if my numbers are accurate right now to date, it's under 500 who have been admitted within that 10,000 number. And it's 2,000 total, which compares to 1 million, which Germany has taken in. And the much larger numbers, for example, look at Jordan, tiny country.
Quarter of their population,
taking in 1.2 million refugees.
I'll tell you, Charlie, you and your colleagues, to put a human face on these horrors is just something that all the world needs to see. Thanks so much for your time.
Jim.
Charlie Sennett. You can find more of Charlie's work along with the rest of the Ground Truth Project team at thegroundtruthproject.org. Time now for tomorrow's Globe Tonight. First look at Wednesday morning's Boston Globe with city editor Stephen Smith. Steve, how are you, and what's on page one?
Jim, a couple of years from now, we know exactly where you'll be spending one of your lonely nights. Wynn Boston Harbor. That, we learned today, is the name for Steve Wynn's Gambling Emporium, which we should note is actually not on Boston Harbor. It is hard by the Mystic River. But no matter, the irrepressible gambling impresario was in Boston today, sharing that name along with new drawings for the massive complex. And he also revealed that the price tag has ticked up to $2 billion. and he has already spent $300 million. The perpetually tanned Wynn remains absolutely sanguine that he will be able to put behind him the imbroglio with Somerville Mayor Joe Curtatone. Wynn is saying he will break ground this summer, and the hope, at least from the Wynn camp, is that the casino will be up and running by 2018. So why don't you go ahead and pencil it in.
Heard he wowed the crowd. Steve Smith, thanks. Talk to you again tomorrow. You know, I never met DJ Henry, but I feel like I know him. Yesterday, the family's lawyer announced that the Henrys had reached a $6 million settlement with the village of Pleasantville, New York, and the police officer who killed him, Aaron Hess. While neither acknowledged blame, as the lawyer said, the unusually high amount of the award speaks loudly. But it is nowhere close to justice for DJ. In 2010, DJ, a junior football player at Pace University, and some friends, they were outside a restaurant when police arrived. According to witnesses, Henry thought the officer, Aaron Hess, was telling him to move the car, so he did, at which point Hess jumped on the roof of his car and shot Henry fatally. The local DA did not indict, and the U.S. attorney said that despite inconsistencies in testimony, no civil rights complaint would issue. Here are a few areas where there are no inconsistencies. Police failed to disclose that another officer, Ronald Beckley, gave a sworn statement saying that he thought the man on the hood, that's his fellow cop Hess, was the aggressor, not Henry. So much so that Beckley discharged his weapon for the first time in his 30-year career. Beckley went on to say his police chief lied when he described what happened. There's also no dispute about this. After handcuffing the wounded Henry, police left him to die, face down on the sidewalk, providing no assistance. And after all this, the local Police Benevolent Association named the cop who killed DJ the Officer of the Year for his, quote, dignity and professionalism. I have no idea how a family goes on after all that, but the Henrys did, creating the DJ Dream Fund in their son's honor. Its stated mission is to share DJ's love of sports by providing the financial resources to enable kids and young adults to say yes to healthy lifestyles through athletics, wellness, and arts programs. I never met DJ Henry, but I feel like I know him because his parents, Angela and Dan, and siblings, Amber and Kyle, have kept his spirit alive. I'd urge you to get involved in their work so you get to know DJ too. What do you think? Email us, tweet us, share your thoughts. We received feedback last night on the chanting, some saw it as anti-Semitic, at a basketball game between Catholic Memorial and Newton North. We mentioned that we've invited the president of Catholic Memorial on, who couldn't join us, and local author William Martin wrote in saying it was a good segment, even without the president, who was probably in the garden enforcing his prohibition against students at a game that, for many of them, might be the high point of their student careers. William, not sure if the president was there, but the school's decision to ban any students not on the basketball team from last night's championship game, according to me, was a tough but appropriate message. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. 10 months since Gloucester announced a groundbreaking opioid program where treatment replaced prosecution. The police chief joins me to talk about the difference they've made in hundreds of lives. Plus, the man they called the Jackie Robinson of hockey. Willie O'Ree will be here. That and more tomorrow at 7. One more thing before we go. Cookie Monster, I love him, has gone down under and searched for cookies. His first trip to Australia in 2 years, and his zoo selfies are pretty adorable with the obligatory kangaroos, koala, a quokka, whatever that is, and even an emu.